All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me once again. It's great to be back to this live event, Talk and Tie Live. For many of us now, I guess the fly tying season is underway. And tonight we're going to talk about Marabou and try to answer as many questions as we can. And if we can, support those questions and their answers through some demonstrations. And time permitting, we'll answer questions posted within the content of this live discussion as well. And if I can't answer the questions, I'll certainly answer them through the comments on either YouTube or the Facebook page, wherever you're watching. Tonight, I'm really excited once again to have a good friend, special guest join me for tonight's sort of kickoff to the 2023-2024 fly tying season. And that's master angler, educator, Tim Flagler. And for those of you who don't know Tim, honestly, I'll be a bit surprised, but he's got one of the most active YouTube channels out there, focused entirely on fly tying, a little bit of other stuff there too. Tim is a videographer by profession, so if you've watched his stuff, his videos are first class. And he just does a wonderful job explaining a variety of fly tying tricks and techniques and patterns with exceptional detail, and he makes them look so simple. His channel, if you're not subscribed to it, please do. He's got over 720 videos there, over 112,000 subscribers, a paltry number compared to mine, and over 36 million views to his credit. I'll get it out. And please drop by and subscribe there. He's also the past recipient of Fly Tyer Magazine's Fly Tyer of the Year Award. He provides focused 1-minute tips for both Orvis and Fly Tyer Magazine. He's a regular presenter and speaker at various fly fishing shows. That's where I see Tim a lot each year. He speaks to fly tying clubs, fly fishing clubs all over North America. It's an honor to have Tim join me once again. So, Tim, welcome back.
It's good to be here, Phil.
Yeah, it's good to see. We got a few people popping on.
Good.
Apparently, we are two of my favorite peeps, J.M. Letty. Thank you. Hope that's a good thing. So we're going to talk about Marabou, Tim.
Yeah, the good and the bad.
Yeah, unfortunately, I guess we'll speak to that. Marabou is not what she wants. Not what she wants used to be. That's for sure. So maybe we start talking about Marabou types, because you go into your local fly shop. There's lots of pegs on the wall, and it can be confusing because there's different types. Maybe we can just sort of walk through them, and I guess probably the place to start might be your strung or your blood quills. That's probably the ones people see the most. At least I do.
Yeah. I can switch over. I think I can show this pretty well. Does that look okay?
That looks great. Let me bring that right up so everybody can see. All right, let's. There we go. I'll get the buttons right.
So yeah, it's sometimes difficult to tell where one type of Marabou begins and ends and when another one starts. And this is the case with particularly this strung Marabou. It's very, very common. And it comes on a string. You can see it's all put together like that. Well, Phil, why don't you talk a little bit about where Marabou actually comes from?
We kind of jumped ahead there a little bit. And as we both know, it's one of the most versatile materials out there. Me as a diehard stillwater angler, we can't live without Marabou or soft materials, just because we have to animate the flies ourselves. We don't have the current that river and stream anglers do. So any materials that can move and breathe and suggest life, we're all over it. Marabou's right up there, probably, if not number 1A, I would think. And of course, Tim, you fish a lot of rivers and streams. It's a common component to your patterns too, and saltwater for that matter.
Yep. Absolutely. Salmon fishing as well. Salmon and steelhead, absolutely key. And like you said, Phil, it's the motion. I mean, it does have a lot of attributes, but I think the main thing is the motion that it has, be it in still water or moving water.
Yeah. And it's got so many uses, right? Like you can bodies, tails. You can dub with it. You make trailing shucks. You can make wings on dry flies because it's reasonably buoyant too, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. In the end, and so many little teeny fibers on it. That's the thing on
yeah,
each one of those little things that sticks out.
yeah. I'm sure
Whatever
there's
the heck they are. Yeah,
barbs
there's a
or
lot.
barbules or
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And contrary to popular belief, it does not come from a Marabou stork, does it?
No, I think it used to, like,
Yep,
way back in the day,
yep.
but, I guess there are not a whole lot of Marabou storks running around. They're not bred for food, and so,
I've
um,
seen pictures of them. I don't know if I'd want to tackle one of those things. They
yeah,
got a big
yeah,
long bill. They're probably just about as tall as me.
yeah,
It would probably be a bit of a bloody mess, but maybe that's where quills come from.
yeah,
Trying
yeah,
to pluck a
wrestling
live
with
marabou
Marabou.
stork, and you got absolutely destroyed.
Uh,
But today it comes from two primary sources: turkey and chickens, and that's grizzly marabou. And it's basically the belly section of the bird where they would sit on the eggs and use those soft feathers to keep the eggs warm and safe until they hatch.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, they come from a domestic turkey. Your butterball, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. I'm still complaining. I want a holiday where we get steak.
yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
Well,
Um, but from my understanding, I used to work for a Canadian fly tying distributor, Superfly, a number of years ago, and we used to buy marabou in huge quantities in its raw state. And I was always led to believe or told it came from actually United States, was then sent to the Far East, China primarily, where it was sorted and sized by length and by type, and we'll get into those in a little bit more detail. We touched on them a little bit, and then a lot of times it's sewn together on a ribbon or just with sewing, pretty strong thread, almost string through it, and that's where that strung name comes from. And
yeah,
then we
yeah,
would buy it back in kilos, like a kilo of feathers is a lot, like a 6 cube box. And then we would buy it by the type of marabou, the different types, they would get sorted over there. And then we would dye it and process it and package it and then put it off to market after that. So that's my understanding where the marabou comes from. Of course, it's easily dyed. That's one of its benefits. We can get it in just a cornucopia of colors. That's my big word for the day.
well, that's my question, Phil. I'm you would know. I'm assuming that most of this, in its raw state when it's taken off the bird, is white. Is that
Yeah, pure
correct?
white. Yeah,
Pure
you're
white.
right.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
white. Yeah, and
Um,
it's dyed, so it's going to take colors very, very well.
yeah.
Because it's
Because Rosenbauer and I were talking about that. It came up with another thing with mottled turkey, wings,
yes,
primaries that you use, and it's very hard to get those modeled anymore. And he said because they've bred all that color out of, the domestic turkeys that are raised for food. They really want them white. They don't want any
yeah, they
modeling in
want
them
them
anymore.
white, and a lot of times the modeling we used to do it by. It used to be there was a term you could get micro fleck turkey flats, which is another bird on a turkey, another feather on a turkey, and the flecking was literally flicking ink through a very
At it,
narrow
yeah,
opening and modeling it that way. I used to use Ozark turkey for mayfly nymphs, particularly Calabatus, and it's hard to get,
right, right,
right? And nowadays, you'd probably have to do it with a marker or something, or really source it out to
yeah,
find it. But I guess it just doesn't have the common use, and therefore, or people aren't aware of it, and doesn't get used. And of course, if it doesn't get used, it doesn't get sold. It's
right,
not
right,
it's not profitable to keep it on hand. So if you get that stuff, you want to hold on to it for forever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I just got some from, it was, somebody, at the Fly Tyer Symposium just, last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, had a bunch from an estate sale. I
Yeah.
cleaned them out.
Sounds good.
uh, yeah,
Driving around New Jersey, scouring garage sales and estate
yeah,
sales.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks.
That's
And
where the good stuff comes from, guys.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
it is because I've got some stuff that the packaging and the companies are no longer around, and
yeah.
it's really high quality stuff. And I guess we should talk about that because, frankly, Marabou's not what it used to be, is it?
No, it's not, and it's kind of a shame. And you know, in some respects, it's better because there are more colors. There's more variety.
Mhm.
It's I mean, everywhere seems to have it. It's rarely in short supply. But sometimes when you get a package, particularly the strung stuff anyway, it's labeled strung.
Yeah,
You know, you start going through them, and each and every feather is pretty different. You know, some are missing tips, others that's not really fluffy at the tips, and so finding, you know, matching feathers if you need two feathers to do something gets to be a bit of a trial, if you will. But you know, there are ways around it. You
yeah,
don't always have to, you know, use the whole feather. You can use the fibers that run down the sides of the stem. There are a whole bunch of things you
yeah,
can do to get around that. And so yeah, it can be a little disheartening when you go pulling through one of those strung segments, and you know, from a whole pack you find like five or six that are really good, and then the rest are kind of meh, you
yeah. And
know.
then your next pack's actually not half bad. But I also
Yeah.
find too that the plume length, some packages you pull out, they're barely an inch and a half long. The next one are nice and
Yep.
big. I personally like for my patterns, I like the fluffy fibers, not the real the fine stuff, just for tying leech tails and things like that. I know steelhead, and we'll talk about this in the types as well. Steelhead anglers who are tying more spey type flies might want those long, thin fibered. You know,
Right.
it's very similar to heron or blue-eared pheasant. But there's other substitutes out there, isn't there? You like Arctic fox is one thing you
Yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah, and I use, and it's a lot of it's because of the inconsistency with the Marabou, quite frankly, is that,
Yeah,
um, you know, you're if you're tying a couple dozen flies and you want them all to be the same, say you're selling them or doing whatever, tying an order for somebody, you want them all to be the same, and it gets a little tricky with the Marabou to do that. It's easier to do with something like Arctic fox, which is you know, more coherent off the whole patch of fur, for
yeah.
example.
Yeah, and other substitutes I've used, my squirrel and mink strips as well,
Mhm.
leaving the micro zonker cuts work good. Substitute for tails. I've used the base from a schlappen feather or a large saddle hackle, the stuff most people strip off the side of the quills and throw in the waist roll.
Yep.
Makes great little tails on small micro leeches and small patterns you want a small tail for. Um, and there's a good question here now. Having said that we're concerned about, Marabou is not what it wants to be, what it needs, what it once was. Um, there is a new player on the horizon. Fulling Mill has just come out with some new select Marabou, and a friend of mine purchased a bag of this stuff, and I used one plume for a tying video. That's all he let me have. Um, and it was very nice. I was
Yeah.
impressed with it. So hopefully they also will have this out because it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, there are a couple other I have some here, a couple other brands that I've been able to
Yep.
find that you know, really high quality stuff. A price tag comes with it for
Yeah.
sure. And another one, I'm not even sure the company really. Um, just got this stuff recently and haven't used it much, but for the strung packs
Yep.
really look really nice, very consistent across the whole string, and so yeah, excited to really get into those a little bit
Yeah.
more.
I guess you just gotta shop around and have a look. A good question here from Tinkering Today. How do I distinguish between Marabou and Schlappen? Well, Marabou is what we're talking about tonight. Schlappen is actually a feather off the bird near the base of the tail, as I understand, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a large saddle hackle that you would use for a woolly bugger, for example.
Yep.
So the Schlappen feather, I'm talking about using the base fibers off there. The stuff you would strip off as you prepare a feather. You usually strip that stuff off the sides and throw that away to expose the main part of the feather. That's actually pretty good stuff. So just about every bird feather, turkey flats have it. Saddle hackle will have that flue, I call it. Schlappen, of course, pheasant rump has it. It's just that soft stuff, downy stuff that we tend to throw away because we're all interested in the main portion of the feather itself. So hopefully that takes care of that question. Okay, so let's talk about Marabou types. You touched on it a little bit. I got a little ahead. I got excited to have you here, Tim. So I got a little.
Yeah, I think can you switch back to 2 camera mode, Phil? Is that?
I can. I thought I had. Let's.
There we go. Yeah, tired of seeing myself up there. Kind of weird.
It's been a while. This is the first one of the season, so there'll be some lumps and bumps, I'm sure, along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about. Let's go back to talking about Strung or blood quills. So these are the most
Okay.
commonly available that you'll see. What happened to my light?
Yeah, there's the Strung again.
Right. Yeah. So I'll bring that. Let me bring that up so everybody can see. So this is the the most commonly type. It's often called Strung because literally the plumes in the package are sewn or strung together. You can see the string going through the base of the fibers there, and that's how it sort of comes in a long ribbon, I think we used to call it, and then we would dye the whole ribbon or a bunch of ribbons that color in usually large quantities to keep our dye lots consistent, and then it would go into bulk, and then when it was time to get packaged, the packagers would bring out that bulk and they would literally cut those ribbons into 4 or 5 inch or 3 inch, whatever what we used to call the BOM or the bill of materials was, and put it in the package that way. So it's dyed in large quantities and then sort of trimmed down to a slimmer amount to fit inside of a bag.
Yeah, and so as you guys can probably see here, there isn't exactly consistency. I mean, this is a beautiful feather right here. That's a trophy in my book. But then its next door neighbor is pretty jacked up, and then this one, although they're definitely usable fibers down here, the top is got some issues and a very thick stem, so not good for wrapping. These very, very stringy, and again they that's more like a spey for a spey fly, and so then we're back to another really nice feather, but it's kind of got the tip that's real stringy, and so across the board it's just not as consistent as I guess we'd all like, but that's to be expected. These things are coming off of, well, there's a beauty right there. That's what I like, Phil. That super
That's
fluffy.
what I like, because I like stripping that right off the side of the plume. We'll get into using it in a little bit, because sometimes the use of how you use the material is dictated by what you want to do and the feather you've got. Sometimes you can strip it off the side. Other times you've just got to stroke the whole plume together and tie it in that way. You did have a plume there with a very thick stem.
Yeah.
And that sort of segues into the next kind of Marabou is the long or select. Now that wouldn't be an example of one, but some distributors have long or select Marabou, and I was always taught that is characterized by a very thick stem, and that is because that is what we called a mature plume, because one of the other names for strung Marabou is blood quill. And that's because when the bird was harvested, which is the polite way for killed, there was still blood. It was like a sapling still going up inside of the quill itself, whereas long Marabou, or those mature plumes or select plumes, are really denoted by very stiff, almost to the diameter of a pheasant tail fiber. So you clearly can't wrap that around a hook shank like you could get away with a strung Marabou plume to make a steelhead fly, like a popsicle. But those long or select Marabou plumes I really liked because they had really bushy fibers on them, and were great for long-tailed flies, like, again, leeches, or an English pattern called a humongous. We have nice long fibers. What do you got there?
I got these are blood quills.
Yeah.
But like this one, like you were saying, there's some beauties in this one. I mean, there's some ones that aren't great, but some other ones with extremely long fibers in them. And Yeah, that's a trophy right there in my book. Um,
You've got my
and
address, right? You're going to set
yeah,
aside for me.
no. These these are as rare as hen's teeth. I'm keeping
Well, when I see
them.
you in Maribou in a few,
Yeah, no,
I'll
they're
be
they'll be
like
gone
Yoda
by then.
rummaging through your stuff.
They'll, that feather will be long gone before that. That's
Oh,
gonna get
okay.
tied into
Yeah.
something.
But I guess you just gotta, you really gotta look around, and when you're looking at the packages on the pegs, you've got to think about what you want to use it for, whether you're a still water tyer, a steelhead tyer, a saltwater tyer, and what the needs of those patterns are. And you might have, say, the bag. Say those were both gray quills there, Tim. That bag on the right might be no good, and the one in behind it, the one on your left, is perfect for what you need. So
yeah.
you got to look around a little bit and maybe open the bag and have a little bit of a snoop, and see if it meets your needs.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this looks like just regular strung marabou, and
Yeah,
it's labeled blood quill,
yeah,
but
which is
this
yeah, and
this
again, I think that's just a term different distributors use, and I could be wrong, often am. But blood and strung are the same feather.
yeah,
Strung is just a term used because they actually sew it or string it together to keep
and
it all
this
manageable, so it's not blowing all over the place. Right,
yeah,
that
this
makes it
is
easy to package. You just cut that off the ribbon, and it might be a 4-inch cut, so the packager would just cut those into 4-inch sections and then stuff them in the labeled bags, and off to market they go. That's not a bad bag.
yeah, this is beautiful, beautiful stuff. It
Yeah,
really is. I mean, almost every feather. Some of them have the weird stringy tips on them,
yeah,
but pretty much it's all the big fluffy stuff. Um, yeah, this is really, really, really nice. And
yeah, yeah. Brian's got a good tip here. Find that brushing the feather with a toothbrush can sometimes help revise some bad fibers, and that's a common thing to do with synthetics. Everything, give them craft fur, all those kind of things. Give them a brush before you use them. They get
yeah.
stuffed and crammed in those bags sometimes and get tangled up, and you got to free the fibers a little bit to get what you want.
I'll also say too, Phil, that when you marabou is so funny. Like if you have a fly that's just out of the water,
Yeah,
you've just fished it, it looks terrible. It comes out
yeah,
of the water, all the water comes out of it, and you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was fishing that thing. It looks horrible.
yeah,
You just drop it back down the water, and it totally comes back to life. The
yeah,
fibers go out, it gets all the movement back, but like I fish like Atlantic salmon, a lot of popsicle flies
yeah,
or Alaska boos or whatever they you want to call them, and some of them even when they've been out of the water they're just all jacked up. But
yeah.
this thing, once it goes back in the water, is just going to come to life again and be absolutely as good as new. But and again,
Probably our
this
equivalent of having a shower in the morning, right? Or hairs
yeah.
all over the place. Style it up and get it going again.
Yeah, and you're as good as new.
Yeah,
And all this stuff is, guys. This is just it's for me. I tie it in by the tip,
yeah.
and then just palmer it up. I've heard some people insist on tying it in by the base, but to me that gets to be a little harder.
Yeah,
So
I have it depends what I'm doing. If the stem is thin enough, you can tie it in by the base or the tip. But the tip's usually better because you also get that natural taper of the fibers
right,
working properly. And I have used tools like oh, let me get you on double here. You watching you.
there we go.
You have like Mark Petitjean's magic tool where you can fold a marabou plume and put it in a dubbing loop.
Right.
That works as well. It's a little more fidgety and tricky and takes a little bit of practice. But yeah, definitely. So I guess we can talk about some other quill types too while we're here. Woolly bugger marabou. I saw somebody was asking about that, using it just for tails. Valco Bay Runner here. So technically, bugger marabou is named for tails only.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I use it for a lot of different
Yeah,
stuff, but yeah, I can see why. I mean,
it's
um,
shorter,
it's shorter,
fluffier.
yeah, and so for tails, here I'll show you some. I have some different packages here, and again, it kind of there's a range there, and so I have two here, different manufacturers. These are definitely much longer.
Yeah.
The feathers themselves, I think the fluff on them though is nice and short. I mean that would make an absolutely wonderful Marabou tail. You can see that there's fluff all the way out to the tips.
Yeah.
Gosh, I got some really good Marabou here, Phil.
No, I'm getting kind
You a little Marabou envy, do you?
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean that's a beauty. But then, yeah, you're going to get some feathers like this too that have the flat
Yeah, that's
tips.
more of a
That,
turkey flat.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And some that are kind of truncated, but there's another good one there, and then just a little bit smaller ones. But I think that kind of the same deal. I imagine it's how different companies and different people in China sort it. These are nice, and
Yeah.
these are also um,
Some of them look like they were in a fight.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This is not a great pack right here.
Yeah.
Thus far, there's a couple good ones.
Yeah.
That one's a beauty. But yeah, and so you just it's kind of hit or miss with these things. And
Well, yeah, I think they're going to strike a balance of how much are you prepared to pay, because when you start talking select, where where somebody's having to be sit and sort through, yes, you're going to get some premium materials for that, but you're also going to get pay for that because somebody's got to look for it. Whereas if they're just pulling it out of a bulk assortment and cutting that ribbon, as I said earlier, into 4-inch. That's the standard for that company, into 4-inch sections, stuff it in the bag, put a label on it, throw it in the pile with the rest of them, and then off it goes to ABC Fly Shop next week kind of thing. That's, they're striking a balance here. So I think we've said enough that the moral of the story is you just got to look around and see what's out there.
And I can't imagine the poor devil that would have to sort through Marabou feathers. Have nightmares tonight about that. Wow.
And there are some, I know of some tyers around the world that they sell specific Marabou and they market it as they hand select everything. But and their Marabou, from what I've seen, is fantastic, but it's very hard to get because it's one person doing that. There's only so much they can do at a time, and it gets a reputation, it gets popular, and it's bought out as fast as it's put on the shelves, kind of thing. So
well, here's a question for you, Phil. Sure. And I was thinking about it today. Marabou as a tying material, though, as long as people have been tying flies, Marabou is fairly recent as a fly tying material. When you think about like a classic Atlantic salmon flies, for example, the Marabou was not really used in them. And the Catskill style flies, for example, not a whole lot. Even Carrie Stevens streamers, Marabou just wasn't really a thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You wonder, with the world eating so many turkeys nowadays, particularly here in North America, the turkey producers going, man, we got a lot of feathers.
Yeah, we got to do something with them.
Hey,
yeah, I got an idea.
They'll buy anything. Well, and if coming from Marabou Stork, obviously not permitted for a variety of good reasons. You got to find an alternative. It was like blue-eared, heron for Spey flies. Everybody went to blue-eared pheasants, and then other things, which segues in. You can actually buy Spey Marabou that is graded for its application for Spey flies. So it's got long, thin fibers, not too much of the fluffiness to it. And I think you've got some there, Tim. You said you found them. They're not always easy to find.
Yeah,
right?
let's take a look at these guys.
I would say on the Pacific Northwest with Spey tyers there, and with Spey, and probably more so now with some of the trout Spey that's going on. But you've got some there, and you can see how, for the most part, very fine fibered feathers. You're gonna be all right.
Wow, this I haven't opened this package. They're gorgeous. For that, I mean, they're they're a little thin in terms of, being fluffy. But yeah, for those long, skinny tips like that, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and the small ones like Mama Angler here, Mama Angler, sorry. Spey hackle chick. Well, that's Spey hackle chickaboo is actually from a chicken.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it's great for little bait fish patterns. I know our friend Cheech uses them on some of his patterns. Like his baby fat minnow uses Spey hackle chickaboo, I believe, in there originally did.
I also have in here, I have stuff that is so that looks kind of like this. It's sold as select Marabou plumes. And
Yeah.
so
Those are the ones
just
that are more when we used to sell them, we used to call it long marabou because it is long compared to a strung plume. And again, that super thick stem,
stem. Yeah, I
which
mean,
is
look at this.
wonderful for bugger tails, leech tails, um, you know, bait fish patterns. You can't wind it on a hook. You've got to strip it. Strip, and that's, for my balanced leeches, that's probably my favorite type of material right there, that middle 2/3.
These guys.
Yeah, right
Yeah,
there. And
that's
I would literally
beautiful.
strip and roll them down. So strip off what I can. And then when I can't handle it anymore, rather than just a one aggressive tear, I just strip and roll in little 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch sections and just roll what I have stripped onto what I haven't until I've stripped off what I want. And then tie that in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, those are nice feathers, but yeah, you're not going to wrap them. You're going to strip them and
Yeah.
take the
Yeah, and again,
stuff off.
it depends on the use you want it for, right? If you're going to tie popsicles for, Alaska booze, as you mentioned, that's probably not the marabou plume to use,
Right, right.
but a spey might be, or certain types of blood quills, and everybody's got their own personality on the flies they like to tie. So they're going to, choose what they want. So let's talk about the last kind that's on our list tonight before we get into using it and tying maybe a couple of patterns. Is grizzly marabou.
Okay. Well, actually, can I show two
Sure,
more? Just
absolutely.
because
We're
they're
just flying
they're a
high
little
here.
different. This one is it's been these are not natural markings on here,
Yeah,
but they call it fine marabou, and it's the first I've seen it this year. It's like super super fine, very very different. I can't say it's exactly fluffy. I don't really know how to describe it, but
yeah. That looks like
they're
something I would use in a saltwater pattern and make an interesting marabou leech, where you're tying the clump. They're tying it in as a tail and then clumps like 2 or 3 wings. You guys
yeah.
go to my YouTube channel. There's a marabou damsel on there. You can see how that goes. But there's lots of that kind as well, not only in the types, but now all these modelings and barrings that's making it interesting.
Yes.
Lots of companies have modeled or barred marabou where they're literally, and that was always when I was again working in, when companies came out with that technique or that option, everybody was trying to figure out how they did it.
And this stuff, it's mini marabou, but to me, this almost looks like um, philo plume.
Or
This,
even grizzly marabou.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
teeny,
that
teeny.
almost looks like, in some ways, even looks like a pheasant rump feather. But
Yeah, well, there is philo plume right there.
yeah, right
That's,
there, file plume or aftershaft.
yeah,
Another, I love that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
And there's boatloads of it in here. This is again, this is one I recently got and haven't kind of explored it, but that's sort of neat stuff.
yeah.
I kind of wonder where it actually comes from.
That sure looks. That almost looks like. God, that looks like pheasant rump fibers. But
Doesn't it
pheasant,
though?
it does. But pheasant rump being so gray, it
There's no
doesn't
way to
always.
dye it.
Yeah, it doesn't take a light dye very well. Like to get pheasant rump, like a light olive, a light pale olive, you got to dye it yellow, just the way you get the yellow lies on the gray. But boy, that looks. I wonder. God, that looks like pheasant rump.
Yeah, and almost every one has got the little
Yeah,
phyllo
which
plume on
again,
it.
to me is something that it's That sure looks like a pheasant rump section to
Wow.
me. But whoever's dyeing it that nice consistent green is doing a
Yeah,
good
it's
job.
gorgeous. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a hairline.
yeah.
Go Bill Keogh.
They do some. Yeah, they do some nice. He knows a little bit about feathers.
Yeah, you think?
All right, so
Uh,
let's talk about how to use it. Uh,
okay.
uh, okay, let's get to the question here. Are you a stripper or a measurer?
Ooh. I'm pretty much a
A pincher or a measurer.
yeah, I'm a terror
A terror. Okay.
terror.
Yeah.
And so if I have, what I mean by that is if I have long stringy fibers, which I just it's kind of one of my pet peeves. Let me grab one out of here. I'm sure there's some stringies in here. There's some stringies right there. So with the stringies, switch cameras. Like there's some fluffy stuff down in here,
Yeah.
even though that's not great, but I got these real stringy tips up here. And so I take my thumb, get the stringy tips, and I'll use my thumbnail, which unfortunately I have just trimmed. You don't want to do this with scissors. It
No,
looks
you want that.
just,
You want a
yeah,
ragged.
more rough look.
Yeah.
And so you can get it down and it just looks that way you have I'll brush some of these down and out of the way. You can make a a fairly decent say woolly bugger tail, still nice and fluffy. You've just gotten rid of those tips and it doesn't look altogether natural, but it's good enough.
Well,
And so that's why I'm
yeah.
a
See,
terror.
I'm more of a. I like to measure the tails if I can, but a lot of times the specific feather dictates what I do nowadays because of some of the quality issues that we've been struggling with in recent years. Because some plumes just that's all you can do to use that piece. Others have the nice you can get you can be able to measure them to length. My tendency to want to measure and is just to have those fine tips, the natural taper of each fiber working with you. My gut says I feel it gives me more movement. Whether it does or it doesn't is probably debatable, but at least you feel better about the fly you tie. Can't believe I did that. And you'll fish it better. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
just, I see the like woolly buggers, especially some of the commercially tied ones. It's just all straight fibers back there. There's no
yeah, they're
puff to
just
the
taking the
tail.
whole
It's just,
plume and just
yeah,
using
and
the
it's just like straight as an arrow back
yeah.
there. Whereas, this is going to have some
Yeah, I like
body.
the bushy stuff. And
Yeah.
Chuck Harvey, hi Chuck. Chuck and I fish together from time to time. Do you use the tips of the bugger marabou versus I guess vice or versus tearing the sides of the strands for tails? So when you're using bugger marabou, Tim, are you tying the whole like stroking the whole plume from one end to the other and tying it in
Yeah,
that way?
yeah, and
Yeah.
with most of that bugger, the good bugger marabou, you can absolutely do that. And so again, we got to be a little selective in the ones that we're doing, but like on this guy, this is a beautiful feather. And so what I do here is I take this stuff off, and
Yeah.
actually what I would really do here, because I'm kind of I really don't like wasting materials. So what let me find my scissors real quick. Sorry guys. They're here somewhere.
Well, hold on. Let me get this so everybody can see. They don't need to see me through this.
So with this, what I do is if I was using this for a marabou or a woolly bugger tail, I'd want this portion. I'd probably take two of these feathers, but I'd snip here. I know my marabou tail is, or my woolly bugger tail, sorry, is probably
Yep.
going to be about that long for
Yep.
a size 10 or a size 8 hook. And I'm kind of nuts about this. I actually have a bag right here. I save all sorts of marabou trimmings, and that way I can use this stuff, particularly on this side. I could strip this off, later,
Yep.
strip it off, clump it up and, you know, use that on a smaller woolly bugger. And so you don't want to just throw that whole base of the stem out.
Yeah.
And even on this, I could take my fingernails and rip some of the, because again, I like the super fluffies, but that on a really, that would be a perfect little tail on a small woolly bugger.
And Tim, you know, I think we're each going to try and squeeze a fly of ours in tonight that illustrates using Marabou. And one of the things that Marabou is great for is dubbing. It is about as easy to dub as rabbit. It twists around thread so nice. It really, really works well. You know, so it's not just used for tails, and you can tie in a length of it by the tips and wind it up, twist it together and wind it up to form a body. It makes a wonderful on mayflies or damsels or bugs like that. You know, the mayflies, it would look like, suggest abdominal gills, those kind of things. So,
and I have that. I showed you that video the other night, Phil. I can.
Pop that up if you want.
Full screen.
Yep, there we go.
And so this is a fly. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to tie it for you tonight, or something similar to it. It's genius. It's Jack Guardside soft hackle streamer, and this one was actually tied with kind of coq de leon marabou, chickaboo, if you will. But and you can see it has that illusion of bulk, although it weighs nothing at all. And when it gets down in the water, you'll see here in a second, it's just got a ton of movement. That's the stuff that you're looking for with Marabou. And plus the illusion of being really big, you know, can look like a nice big sculpin, whatever. And so, a ton of uses. But always that motion is the thing with Marabou. Almost nothing like it.
You know, that's a sorry, Tim, that's an incredible shot. All right. Okay. I got to get us back together. I'm having trouble with the buttons tonight. You can tell this is my first time in a podcast. I got, if people could see my desk, I've got wires and buttons and cameras and lights and all kinds of things going on. So, okay. Well, maybe we, you know, probably a good place as any is to, you know, perhaps
tie one up.
Yeah, tie one up. Why don't you pick one of yours and tie it up and show how you like to use it? I think that's the best way a lot of times to illustrate how to use something is to show it.
How to get it tied in. Let me just get my vise in here and get focused up on that. I think I have everything. I hope I have everything here, guys. I can get a little closer. So this actually, I have never tied Guardside with this particular combination of. Whoops, where are we, Tim?
Yeah, let me get you on there, and it's probably a good time to mention Jack, because he was a firm believer in these soft materials, wasn't he?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was a pioneer with all of his flies, using those, like his sparrow and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he was an inspired tyer. That's and I got the wrong vice chosen here, of course, but
you got some of the new ones. I haven't got those yet. I have to talk to.
Here, you know what? Let me.
You can change over if you want. I could.
No, I think I'm good. I'll deal with these. It's nice that'll be good. We're all set. So this is just a what is it? Size 6, long shanked streamer hook, and just gonna get the thread started. Always leave a little room up there, just in case. And I'm using 140 denier thread here. Doesn't really matter. We're not worried about this. Is a big fly. We're not worried about bulk. And then just a little bit of copper crystal flash because of the colors. You might have seen in that video. I just had probably 3 or 4 strands of crystal flash. gosh, you do not want to over flash a fly. It's just
No.
so. I've learned that from shooting the underwater video. It's just, it sticks out so much, and too much flash is just too much flash. There's no two ways around it. So I'm just going to get this started. There's so many different ways to tie in flash. It's ridiculous, but this is the way I do it. So I got some flash back there. And also what I'm going to do with that flash is I've got a couple of these nice little, this is the woolly bugger, Marabou. And I'm going to kind of try to get them cup side to cup side like that, sort of get their tips evened. And again, I'm going to be thrifty here and go like that, and then just snip these guys off, and they're going to get saved. I'm not going to waste those things. And I just have a little tail like this. A lot of times when you're dealing with Marabou, as gross as this sounds, you can see it's kind of out of control, but if you just wet it, it brings it right under control. And it looks kind of crappy. You know, when I go to tie it in, I'm going to do a tail a little bit longer.
And it also, it keeps it under control, because, you know, when you're doing other, you know, after you put that tail in, and most things seem to have a way of trying to get back into the, you know, wanting attention. It's a great way to
exactly. Yeah, so I got a little tail tied in there, and you can see I got some flash sticking off the back.
Yeah.
Looks pretty good. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back and take one of, I guess I'm going to go with this orange feather first. Yeah, let's do that. I am going to strip off down here. Actually, I can't resist. I'm going to save that too. I know I sound like a lunatic, but
at the risk of offending others, I would. There's some other terms I would use.
So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and all I'm going to do here is I have kind of the front side of the feather facing me. There really isn't much of a difference, but I'm going to isolate the tip as best I can, kind of pull those fibers back. Here's a little, so I pulled the fibers back, and here's a little trick for you. If I was to tie it in just by that stem, that's pretty brittle and pretty weak. So what I do is I cheat. I'm going to go in here. Now I really wish I had my other vise. Where I'm going to tie it in is I'm going to tie in the stem and a bunch of those fibers. I hope you can see that. Yeah. And that just, it greatly increases the strength of that juncture there, if you will. And
cool.
Yeah, and some people hate that I do that. I've done it on a few videos and gotten some rather negative feedback.
Well, and it's funny, I watched Kelly Gallup tie some of his big streamers he uses out west, and I've formed, if I want a really long tail, what you're doing is exactly how I'll do it, and then I'll just secure the thread wraps back over the tail, almost like if you're doing bucktail.
I got you.
Tying in bucktail that way, where you're trying to get it distributed all around the shank. And it makes wonderfully long tails if you want a super long-tailed fly. Of course, the challenge with any long-tailed fly is fouling.
Fouling, yep.
But some tricks I've seen, some tyers will almost post the tail, put wraps underneath and in front. Other techniques involve actually winding it down into the bend a little bit. I've even seen some tyers, if that tail is going to be somewhat shrouded by other materials, of like using a UV resin to just sort of glue a short little section adjacent to the hook that sort of keeps them all tethered together, but still the tips are free to move.
It's,
I
so
like that. That looks good.
yeah. So I'm basically gonna do the same with one of these marked feathers. Again, I've never tied this particular color sequence. I have no idea how this is gonna look in the end. You can, if you want to. I just fold the fibers back generally,
Yep.
but as you can do pretty much with anything, if you run your scissors along the stem like that, you can get them folded back for the most part
Yeah.
as well. But
Yeah. Don't use the sharp edge, right?
yeah, it took me like 8 times to get that figured out, Phil. That was
Well, and I'm saying it because I did it too. I saw it and went, "Oh, that looks so
oh yeah,
cool."
it's so easy.
Yeah, and then why is my feather on the what's going on here?
So even though these are real open spiral wraps, guys.
Yeah.
I'm covering some ground here, and do I have another feather I can tie in?
Sure you do. After what I've seen on that in that
I think we're just gonna go like this. Okay, we'll do Jack Guardside proud and keep it nice and sparse and light. And here I'm getting into some stemmy stuff, but I think I can get another wrap, maybe. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Not on a live tying event, we're not. Just hammer that. I did want to show you guys, just because I have you all here, or Phil has you all here captive.
I got them here. You're keeping them captive.
Wow. Look at that thing. Holy smokes.
I take that fishing. If you don't want to give it a home, I'll take it.
Oh, once that little bugger marabou fluffs out back there, that's going to be a gem. So on Jack's on the soft hackle streamer, what really kind of made it was mallard dyed wood duck, some fine dark markings in the front. And what I'm going to do for mine is this is actually from it's another really good source, honestly, for like bugger marabou. This is a Coq de Leon.
Ooh.
Yeah, pelt. And so I use these feathers for like large soft tackles like I'm going to do here. I'm going to use this bad boy. But these guys up here, this is the Chickaboo pelt. And check these things out. I mean, it's some amazing.
Yeah, well, that's grizzly marabou.
Yeah,
it's from
really,
Plymouth Rock.
really nice. I mean,
yeah.
that is some fine looking stuff right there. We'll put that away for later. Anyway, so I'm going to use one of the feathers from down here. And Brahma hen's the same way. It's grizzly or chicken marabou, and it's a tough choice.
That's
right
nice
or left. Stuff. Yeah. Oh, decisions. We're gonna go with the lighter one. I might regret that.
You could use both of them.
No, then we're not doing Jack a solid. we want to keep this nice, but this stuff has just got some beautiful markings in it, and I'm going to do the same thing. I also find myself more and more, guys, bracing my because I'm getting old and shaky. Using my fly is like a workbench. Keep my hands steady. Little counterclockwise spin, and then again grabbing a whole bunch of those fibers, not just the stem.
And that's a great tip, Tim. That's spinning counterclockwise for any of you having trouble with every time you want to wrap your thread over to tie something down, it leaps forward and generally just doesn't cooperate. That little trick is worth its weight in gold right there, because it jumps back onto the material and helps you grab it and tie it down.
Here's another little nugget for you, and I can't even tell you why this works. I could just fold these back or run my scissors on them, but if I take my fingers and go around like this and pull the stem like loop it down through my fingers, it generally
Yeah.
does just this amazing job. You really have to loop it around, but folds those fibers, or most of them anyway, right rearward. And so this is just going to add a little bit of those fine, dark, natural markings. Just keep on sweeping them back to the front of the fly, which I think are very, very important. That shot of the sculpin that I showed there on the video, really, you see those fine, dark markings in all living things. I mean, we were talking about Marabou having motion, and living things have motion, but they also, almost all of them, have fine, dark markings. And I think, as small as these markings are, trout or salmon or whatever, recognize it, pick it up, and go, oh, that's something living. I'm gonna maybe eat that.
Well, it just looks alive, right? For me,
Yeah.
as being the Stillwater guy, is it just, you can't beat that when you've got no real current to animate your flies. You've got to anything you can do to make that fly look alive, and it just that just looks good. I'm getting as excited as you are. Better watch ourselves here.
Yeah. Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
that could get some use tomorrow, actually. Our weather's supposed to be decent. And I have a large project due, so no better time than to go fishing,
Oh, I see you have the same priority sequence.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I know what you're thinking. It's better to plan, right, than just
Yeah.
go in there crazy, half cocked.
Oh, yeah, I like that Coq de Leon on front. Little
Oh,
darker face on there.
that's a good looking fly. Leech, crayfish, minnow.
Crayfish, yeah. I'm gonna go just a tad shorter on the tail. I don't want them to be too long. Oh yeah, baby.
And humble too.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to bag those colors up. That's
Yeah. Well, that'll be you saw it here first, folks. With the next video on Tim's, we got to have a name for it. Maybe people can. Well, it's a
I
it's
don't
a guard
know.
side.
I will tell you guys, though, one thing you got to watch out for with all the Marabou flies like this is when you're tying these things, you can't see that hook point. And I think I've hooked myself more times tying Marabou style flies like this than any other time.
Maybe that's why they call it blood quills.
Yeah, it just disappears and you just stab yourself every time. But yeah, it'll have motion. It's got the fine dark markings in it. A lot of different colors. I think that thing will fish like crazy.
Yeah.
You're up now, dude.
Ah, it's mine. That was good. Actually, there's great tips there. Great tips there. So a couple things. There was a question here about filoplume or aftershaft feathers, and so I'm just going to pop this up right now. This is a pattern of mine, one of my core damselfly nymphs. I call it the grizzly damsel because that's almost entirely what it's made out of. So the tail is just, a grizzly marabou plume that you stroke to even the tips and tie it in along the shank. The body is just the fibers off the side twisted onto the thread and dubbed, and the thorax, it's hard to see. There's a couple of turns of olive Brahma hen in there, but that soft, feathery, fluffy stuff is an aftershaft or filoplume feather off the base of a grizzly marabou feather. So when you get, and I'll try and pull one out here when I tie and show you, when you pluck off or take out of the package a grizzly marabou plume, you often get that secondary feather that Tim talked about attached to it, and that is the filoplume. So I'll show you some of that when I get my camera up and running here. The next thing, this is similar to what Tim just tied. This is called a wastrel leech, and it's got a barred marabou tail, so actual marabou, but the body is all the fluff, the flue from 2 grizzly marabou feathers, and I fold them into a magic tool, and that allows me to remove the stems but still keep all that soft feather fiber flue under control, and then I insert it in a dubbing loop and just literally wind it up the hook. So it's called a wastrel leech because it looks like all the junk people throw in their wastrel that they don't use, but it's been a really good pattern for me, and it's, you know, suggestive of many different things. And again, that one, if you want to see the tying instructions for both of these patterns, they are on my YouTube channel, the grizzly damsel there and the wastrel leech. But what I'm going to tie for you now is this little slender gem called, probably my favorite damsel nymph. It's stupid simple. It's called the Pearly damsel because of the pearl along its back, but it uses a single marabou plume for the tail, for the body, for the dubbing around the head and the legs. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. So let me see if I can get my camera working. This ought to be hilarious. Okay, that's the feathers I'm going to use. That actually works. So I'm just going to take a single feather, not the best example of a marabou plume. And I'll probably take this one simply because, I'm going to get this sorted out here, simply because I just like how fluffy these fibers are. So I'm going to use, strip a little bit off the side for the tail. I'm going to use the tips to form legs, and then I'm also going to strip a little bit off the side to dub with as well. So let me just switch over to get the vise back in. Is that in focus, Tim?
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Oh, not bad. Oh, so before we get going, this is a, I grabbed out of a bag of grizzly marabou, right? And this is a grizzly marabou plume. This is the Aftershaft or phyla plume feather. So this is a wonderful feather to work with on smaller flies. You can make leeches out of it, thoraxes on mayfly nymphs, crayfish, all kinds of things. But the stem of this feather is ridiculously slender. So if you try to tie it in and wind it up like a regular feather, you're probably going to break it and get frustrated. So this is, you would put this in a dubbing loop. So I literally, if I was to use this, I would remove it from the stem like so, and I'd come in with my scissors and nip that little tip where it attached to the base of the parent feather, if you will. And then this little tip here, I would pluck this out. And then that's basically the feather, the Aftershaft or phyla plume is prepared and ready to go. And it's all more or less the same width. And then I would literally lay it on pull the thread down, put some dubbing wax, lay that feather right on top of that wax thread. So the stem runs right on top of the wax thread. Lay a couple of plumes, 2 or 3 is about all you need to do and all you can manage at any one time. And then build the loop up, sandwich the thread, spin it slowly at first, and twist it right up. And then just simply wind that up like you do any sort of dubbing technique. So that's that Aftershaft feather right there. And I guess if I made that bigger, it might have been better. So hold on here. So again, that's that Aftershaft feather. Like so. Very cool little feather to use for thoraxes and things like that, or bodies you can dub with it. But we're going to tie this the Pearly damsel. That's a number 12, just a standard. That's a Daiichi. Get this close in, 1530. Number 12, I probably tie it 12s, maybe 14s. So I'm just going to get the tying thread started here, just using some classic waxed 8/0. And I usually snap the thread off, but usually when I'm doing demonstrations on camera, that's when the vise decides to go all over the place and get out of focus. So it'll come back up. When I got flies with eyes on them, just one of the things I like to do is put the eyes on right away. So it sort of establishes where my start and finish of this fly is going to be. I just found sometimes if you're building it tail, then body, then everything else, you end up running out of room and your fly has no eyes, which probably in the big scheme of things doesn't matter, but people like seeing flies, damsels and dragons, for example, with eyes on. So for the eyes, you can use, these are extra small mono eyes in black. And I chose black because this is a dark olive I'm going to be tying. A lot of times I will tie with these sort of more translucent, and I will just use a marker, a permanent marker on them, right? And you can make them red, brown, dark olive, and then put a little coating of resin, or don't use super glue because well, you can, but be aware that that super glue reacts with the ink and your red eyes will now be brown or maroon or some other color combination you didn't anticipate was going to happen. So anyway, so when I tie mono eyes on, I just a couple of wraps and just get them on, right? And then once they're on, then I'll turn them and rotate them. I just like staying away from situations where I've got to do my best thread wraps right away. So I just get these on, and of course these aren't behaving. And just some figure 8 wraps in, and then you can even do some posting wraps where I'll take the thread and go around underneath the eyes but above the shank and go around in horizontal wraps like you're doing a parachute post, and then just sort of tug on it. And what that does is it just constricts those eyes, constricts all the thread wraps and holds those eyes in place. They're mono stems, so you can't be too aggressive because you can tear them right off sometimes, especially with some of the stronger threads that are out there now. Okay, so we're going to make this fly entirely out of this plume of Marabou. So the first thing we're going to do is put in a tail. And as I admitted to earlier in the broadcast, I like to measure. This isn't perhaps the best, but I've stripped off some of the flew. So I'm just going to come in, and damsel flies are skinny, so don't overdress them. You don't need to put the entire plume on. I'm probably going to use barely 3/8 of an inch of material here. So I'm just going to come in. I've stood the fibers up perpendicular to the stem. That should even up the tips. And I'm just going to strip. And if this was a larger clump, I would actually perhaps strip and roll and gather those. And I've removed them from the stem. And I've got a pretty evenly matched tips. There's a few errant ones there. I'll allow a little bit of moderate tearing. With your damsel nymphs, I actually like a slightly longer tail. If you see some of the English damsel patterns, they are quite long tailed, just because damsels swim with this sort of sinusoidal snake-like swimming motion that's very hard to duplicate because it's very at the slow, these things move in little, they're plotters. They move at not a fast clip, but they move along, but they take breaks. So trying to get any kind of motion in your fly to suggest that snake-like motion. So we're just going to measure that up, say from the eye to roughly the bend of the hook. I'm going to transfer that measurement. And because the damsel is slender, I want to tie this clump of Marabou all the way along the shank. I don't want to tie it in at the bend because I'll end up with an unnatural bump that I won't have the opportunity to hide with other materials over top. So I'm just going to get that tied in, make sure it's firmly wrapped in. And then I lift up on the material like this, that keeps it on top of the hook, and walk that thread in open turns right down, about halfway between the point and the barb. And I got a slender little tail. And if it's a little ratty, again, if fish can, as Tim has alluded to, if I don't think they care. But if they can see that kind of detail, I always question why, thankfully, they never see the hook, right? So, but just a very slender, mobile tail, like so. For the ribbing, I'm going to put in next, I'm going to use just some the Semperfli 0.2 millimeter copper wire. You could use other colors on here, red wire, chartreuse as well. Sometimes you can add an attractor color, if you will. It's not super overt, but it's in there. But I like copper, just always. And I'm going to tie that along the near side. I'll rotate the fly on its side right now so you can see. I'm going to put that right at the base of the tail and do my best to secure this all the way along the side, like so. Again, I don't want to have that wire, if I can, wander all over the place because I'm trying to keep this body super slender. These nymphs are not robust creatures. The pearly part comes from using pearlescent mylar, like a mirage opal, or in this case, this mirror tinsel. And this is 1/69th. That might be a little narrow. I think I'll go with the 1/32nd, which is basically like your medium. If you were using Mirage Opal, your medium is a 1/32nd. 1/69th is about the width of Flashabou. I remember that when they were working there, Tim. All these things I remember that just sort of flood back into your head. I have a hard time remembering my anniversary sometimes, but I know that's part of being a male, I think. It's just all the dumb space junk we got floating around in our head. So I'm just preparing a
song lyrics and the like.
Yeah, I like that song. Wang, who's that? Who sang that? That's is that Wang Chung?
What song? What song?
Space Junk. It's a good song. Anyway, so I'm taking this Mylar, and you know what? I might just dull this down. Is that a little? That looks a little better, doesn't it? Too much light. And then we're just going to secure that on top. It's flat. We've got it in like so. So right now, all I've really done is use Marabou to form a tail. Big deal. You've seen that already. Tim did a great job with that. So now I'm going to take that Marabou plume, and I'm going to go up the other side. I want to make sure I've got some length to this because I'm going to tie it in by the tips. This little section here, maybe 1/8 of an inch, and just strip it off. And I'm going to I'll roll it like this back and forth in my fingers just to gather it. And I'm going to tie it in by the tips. Now the tips are kind of ragged, so I'm just going to come in and trim them even. You can moisten them to keep them under control. And I'm just going to tie them in. There's not much bulk there. They're not going to add anything negative to the fly. And just wind that up, right up. So basically behind the eyes. And now I'm going to come in and take a half turn just to get, I don't want to start twisting right away because that puts all the twisting stress, if that's the right term, right on the tie-in point. But if I put a half a turn in, the diameter of the hook, the circumference of the hook kind of absorbs some of that twisting force because I want to twist this up into a rope so that the fibers stand out and I'll get this nice little fuzzy body all the way up, which is going to, move and breathe in the water. Those little fibers are going to get going. And then come right up to where my thread is hanging. A couple of wraps over the top, a couple in front just to lock it off. Get in there with my scissor tips and trim them away. And then the beauty of Marabou is, as Tim has pointed out, you can use a little bit of moisture, whether that's a little bit of your spit or saliva, or if you're concerned about the evils of dye, which is probably a good concern, I have a little glass or a sponge, the kind of sponge that people that used to lick a lot of letters used to use to wet those kind of things, those little sponges. So I'm going to first thing I'm going to do is take this pearl mylar and pull it straight over the back. That's what gives this fly its name, the Pearly damsel. So I've just tied that over, make sure it's settled on top, come in, and then I've got the pearly back on it. And then we're just going to take our copper wire and we're going to use that to secure that down. So I'm just twisting it. What I like to do when I'm winding this is there's a tendency, if you're too aggressive, that if you come over and apply pressure right away on the rib, it's going to want to roll that mylar shell back over on the far side. So I come over the top in a controlled manner, but I actually really don't apply any pressure until the downstroke. And then the pressure when you pull straight down comes straight on top and just centers that mylar right on the back. So this is just a subtle little effect we've got going on here. So there we've used, I'll just tie off that wire, pull and twist, help break it away. So now I've used the mylar for the tail in sort of a traditional way. I've got a couple of fibers there that don't want to play, so they're out. And then I tied in a section by the tip and formed that nice fuzzy little body. Got another little tip going, always when you demo. Like so. So now I'm going to make legs. And for the legs, I'm going to use this often discarded portion of the feather, the tips, right here. So I'm literally going to come in And this other feather might be better because it's just illustrated because the tips are a lot finer. So these fine tips make excellent legs. So I'm just actually going to nip the tip out. So I've taken this tip section, and then I'm going to nip the very tip of this tip section out. So I'm going to come in here with my scissors points like so, and that's gone. And then I want to make damselflies have, like all insects, 6 legs. I don't want 600 legs, but I might have 8 or 10, and there a little exaggeration's good. So I'm just going to come in and strip more off. So now I've just got this. And I do this technique whether I'm tying legs in with a hackle feather or like a soft hackle. Is the beauty of doing it this way is if I let go of this feather, it's only going to fall on the ground, but all of these fibers are still intact. So all I'm going to do now is stroke these fibers together like so. And I'm going to tie them in with the tips pointing forward right at the back of the eyes. So I'm going to come in and go over once, twice, and then apply the firm tension, get that tied in, and nip those off. And then I'm just going to come in at this point and divide these into 2 clumps as best I can. You don't have to start counting, but 2 sort of distinct clumps, or just separate them and take about half of them. And I'm going to fold them. In this instance, I've got my thread hanging right behind the eyes. I'm going to hold the far side and start winding thread, just make a couple of thread wraps, and then return to the back of the eyes, and I've sucked those legs right along the side of the body. And I'm going to repeat this for the other side. So I'm just going to come in, grab the remaining clump, and start again right behind the eye and walk back 2 or 3 wraps max. You don't need to go far. And that gives you sort of what we're looking for is to get the legs right outside on the sides of the fly, just like the natural holds them. So a damsel, when it swims, it holds its legs sort of outstretched, and then it takes rests. It'll plod along like a standard retrieve for me with this fly would be a 4 or 5 turn hand twist and a pause, because they take a little swim and then they have to have a break and then they move again. So and this fly when this fly settles, those hackle fibers are going to be outstretched, and it's going to look hopefully very natural. Now all we've got to do is put some dubbing around the head. So I'm just going to literally, I've taken a few plumes off the side of the feather, maybe 3, 4, not very much. There's about 5 there. I'm going to come in and all those little curly cues that are left from stripping it off the stem, I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to pull down the tying thread a little bit, and I'm just going to take 1 or 2 of these things and just twist it around the tying thread. Moisten my fingers a little bit and just twist it. And basically turn your tying thread into fuzzy thread. Don't overdo it. And we'll just twist that up and around. You just grab it and twist it in one direction. And I've got maybe an inch or so of material. And I always like a little bit of a gap between the dubbing and the fly, so I can use this wrap, that bare thread, to get a good position in there. And I'm just going to go around, hold those legs out of the way, and kind of weave the dubbing around and come in. And a little whip finish. And your pearly damsel's done. So that just illustrates that we're not just using Marabou for tails and long flowing things. We can use it for a tail here. We can twist it on and form a body. We can use the tips to form legs, and we can dub it around. And the beauty of this, one of the reasons I like this fly, because it works, besides it's worked so well for me, is there's no dye lot issues. When you've got different materials on a fly, sometimes they accept dye differently, like a synthetic versus a natural, or even certain naturals. And it's tough sometimes to have a consistent color on here. You could certainly use some of the, your barred marabous like this to make some interesting combinations as well. Or, what Tim had there, this kind of stuff, because you will see, damsels in all kinds of colors. So it's always good in any situation on a lake or a river is pay attention to the color of the weed growth and things like this, because the naturals are going to, that's what they're going to hide amongst. They're going to look that color. So that's a pearly damsel. Kind of just illustrates some of the uses. So let me switch back to the other camera. Kind of an ugly jump coming here.
I'll take 2 dozen. 2 dozen?
Yeah, and I'll take
For
some
me?
of yours, maybe, and some of that nice Marabou. Because so there, we've shown again.
That was really cool.
Yeah, so
I like
that fly because it shows some of the different uses for Marabou. Besides, everybody just thinks tails or wings, which is certainly an excellent use for Marabou. So, so what do we got? Some of the questions here. Love stupid, love stupid simple. That's what my wife says. So have we not touched on anything, Tim? We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. We could probably, if people are still sticking around, we can answer a few questions here. I like that one from Chuck. Awesome tip. Now I have to go through my waist roll and grab some. Yeah, well, it's Gary Borger, right, Tim? A lot of times at the fly fishing shows, he will do his tying demonstration out of all the junk you and I and others leave
on the table
after our tying demonstration and come up with some pretty impressive flies. Yeah.
It really is amazing what you can come up with.
Do you ever tie this in browns or tans? Absolutely. All the time. I tie it in light olives, dark olives, mottled olives. A ginger color is really good. A lot of times a damselfly that's just shed its skin is, and the new exoskeleton is yet to harden, is often a pale color. So tans and gingers are always good. And it's always a good idea to, if you got a little aquarium net, sweep them through the weeds and see what colors of damsels, if they're present, you'll bring up. And it's quite common to have an olive one in there, a brown one. I've seen them almost maroon colored, claret, burgundy, really weird colorations. So yeah, always time in a bunch of different colors. Somebody's looking forward to seeing us in Marlborough in a few weeks.
Oh, Dan, looking forward to seeing you as well.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Drop by, say hi. We'll be happy to do that. That's a great little show. Good way to kick it off. For those of you in the Eastern time zone there, that's first week in January, right, Tim? 4, 5,
yep.
6, I think.
Yeah, very, very different than most years. And yeah, I kind of like the idea. Hopefully there's no snowstorm and it gets us away from football conflicts, which used to be real big.
Yeah, that's always the challenge with the Ben and before him Chuck at the fly fishing show, was trying to navigate the NFL playoff schedule.
Yes, right.
And the first year it was in Denver, we got to watch the Super Bowl on the big screen, the 100-foot television in the Gaylord Marriott there. Well, I was stressing out because I hadn't had my COVID results back. That was when I had to have PCR tests.
Oh, that's right.
Home. Yeah.
Yeah, and they wouldn't let you back in the
8 o'clock that night, and I was flying home at 6:30 in the morning. So, and if I didn't have that test, Phil was not going home. So, glad those days are gone. So yeah, it's been. Hopefully, everybody enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun. Tim and I are sure I'll get back together again. We'll do some brainstorming and think about some other subjects we could talk about. If any of you out there have anything you're struggling with or would like more clarity on, or think others would benefit from hearing about, Tim and I would happy to demonstrate and struggle through that too.
Yeah. I'm glad I found some Marabou that I didn't know I had. Well, digging through the piles.
Well, that's what I'm here for, is to help you.
Made my day.
You've got material like me. I've just gone through a major reorg of my tying area, which I have been filming, and I did use some of your tips, Tim, on your reorganization tips. And when I get back from Argentina, because that's where I'm going Thursday, I'll put that all together and show you what I did in my tying area, because it's all kind of personal depending on the space you've got to use to do that. But yeah, if you got any future subjects, don't be shy. Let us know. My goal is, I'd like, now that tying season's on, is to have at least perhaps one a month of these, if we can, on a variety. Maybe it's just tying a particular fly or what have you. Tim, you're welcome to join me monthly. We could just do it that way and become a habit.
Sure.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
could do one live at a fly tying show. I could just see that being a
Yeah.
disaster. Be wires and
Yeah.
everything going. Or,
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of wires.
yeah. So
But
again, thanks for joining us. This is being recorded, so it will be available on my Phil Rowley Fly Fishing Facebook page, on my YouTube channel, and Tim can share that as well. We'll put that out there.
will do.
Yeah. And again, if you aren't aware of Tim, I'd be surprised, but please visit his channel and give his YouTube channel a subscription. What they always say, the algorithm needs it. And of course, my channel sadly pales to yours, Tim. I think I've only got just under 15,000 now, so I need more. So maybe I'll have a telethon or something to get me more subscribers. A subscription drive or something. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. And
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
yeah, it
It
was
was
a lot of
fun.
fun, and we'll see you next time.